It has to come through voluntarism. And it has to come when not so much the woman, but the man of the house recognizes the importance of contraception. That you've got to work with the men before you even work with the women. So it is a tricky area. Family planning itself, politically, has in the past been a sensitive area. Do you believe again those barriers are breaking, melting down?
Yes, I'm seeing the 30-year barriers that existed in India start to break down. And some examples of that are the government just passed a policy now that they're going to allow injectables in the government sector. That hasn't been done ever, and yet we see injectables be the primary thing that women use throughout Africa. It's the tool they most want. And the reason they want it is because they can use it covertly, whether their husband's in favor of it or not. A woman has to be able to have that choice. And we know that if she can delay the births of her children, not have one between the ages of 15 and 19, her chance of dying is so much higher if she has a child between age 15 and 19. But if she also does what's going on here in India, where women space the births very, very closely and then they get sterilized because there was no other method, she's twice as likely to lose that baby. So if she can space those births out, she can also then save herself, save her child, and feed those children. So I am seeing progress because I'm seeing the government say this is important, but I agree with you. We have to educate men and boys of why their wives, why their daughters, why their sons will be more healthy if they can, those births can be spaced, and then you have to educate the women, and it has to be voluntary.
And it has to, because these are patriarchal societies, particularly UP and Bihar. I mean, the decisions are still primarily taken by men. The political decisions are taken by them, and the decisions in the village are taken by them. So I'm just wondering whether governments will be able to change attitudes. Governments can put in investments. How do you change attitudes?
I think you change attitudes by having the frontline workers who are there, the ASHA workers. They go in, they talk with women, they have access to the women in their homes. They also have to talk to the mothers-in-law. It's not just the sons and the husbands, it's the mother-in-laws who often have say over this decision in India. So talking with them about why their grandchildren will be healthier, talking to the husbands about why their children will be healthier. I saw exactly this. Actually, a young woman that I spoke to, Devi was her name, in UP last year. She had been convinced by a frontline worker to talk to her husband. Her husband's first initial reaction was he wasn't sure, but then he talked to the frontline worker and he decided they absolutely wanted to space the births of their children. Then they went and talked to the mother-in-law, and she was not in favor of it, neither was her husband. But they said, this is a decision we're going to take, even though we're living in our mother-in-law's home. We're going to take this decision because we know our children will be healthier. And guess what? We'll be able to educate them as well. That's what you need with the ASHA workers, really educating families.
So your sense is the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaigns are working. Your sense also, interestingly, is that you're not just now focusing on healthcare, you're also moving in urban areas to a major project on sanitation. In a sense, linking it to the Swachh Bharat program of the government of India. Do you see that as a natural progression from your earlier commitment to healthcare to now move to issues of urban sanitation in particular?
Absolutely. And the reason we believe in urban sanitation is, again, it's Bill and I like to work on things that are, we call them ultimately upstream. If 600,000 children in this country are dying from diarrheal diseases, that's something you don't die of in Europe or in the United States or in Japan. Part of that is not just vaccines, but it's working upstream to make sure that there isn't open defecation and that people have access to clean and private toilets, and that there's good, what we call fecal sludge management, so you don't have all of that out in the environment. You have to work on that if you believe in making sure that children can survive. And so we're thrilled to actually work with the government. Once they came in and said that's what they want to do, we said, great, these are the pieces we're already working on. How do we connect up and work together?
And you're finding Narendra Modi someone you can do business with, because you work with both the UPA government and the NDA governments at the center. You work with state governments. How do you want to compare them for us? Do you see all of them now conscious? Do you see Mr. Modi in particular conscious of some of these issues that you're now raising?
He's absolutely, and he's committed to them. I mean, you've seen what he's done with Swachh Bharat. You see what he's doing with Beti Bachao. He's very serious about that. I met with the Ministry of Women and Child Development this morning on specifically the statistics around Beti Bachao. But we also work, in UP with a different government. Bill and I and our foundation are apolitical. We care about children, we care about lives, we care about equity for moms. And so no matter who's going to come into political office, we're going to work with them on their priorities and make sure we can further issues where we feel like we have some expertise and can bring some expertise to bear, like a technical support unit, and whatever their priorities are.
And you think that it is critical, in a sense, to remain apolitical.
Absolutely.
Because the moment you become, in a country like India, presumably aligned politically, then the work for a foundation like yours must become more difficult. So while you're supporting Swachh Bharat, you're not supporting Narendra Modi as much as the cause of Swachh Bharat.
We are supporting the cause of keeping children and mothers and families alive. And that's true in the United States as well. We have very different political systems. We're going through an election this year. No matter who comes into government on either side of the aisle, we're going to work with them. And we're going to work on the places that we have common interests. Because Bill and I believe in lifting up all humanity, no matter what country they're in, no matter what political environment they're in.
In fact, that's where I'm going to take a break, because one of the interesting aspects is the level of commitment that you and Bill Gates have shown to countries like India and indeed countries across the world. What drives you is what I'm going to ask you. You're listening to Melinda Gates. After the break, what drives the Gates Foundation? That's in a moment from now.
देखो भाई, ऐसा है